Morning, grade 11s. I'm going to be doing page 110 today. That's the last way we would see a quadratic equation. It tells us something differently than the other two, and you're going to have a quiz on everything up to today, page 106. Not everything, page 106 to 109. And that'll be due Sunday. Okay, so let's get down to it. Alrighty. So there's my lamp. Here we are on page 110. Now, we've already seen this. We have seen quadratics. Nope, that's not what I wanted. We have seen quadratics that look like this. Except we didn't have the A yet. But this part of it, we know. I'm going to get my little round pen light thing back. There we go. This we know. These gave us our roots, didn't they? And our roots are the x-intercepts. So, and an x-intercept we know is at x comma 0. And that 0 is a y value. So, therefore, if I have y equals, and I'm not going to do anything with a right now, if I have y x minus p and x minus q, then I know that y is 0. And then I know x minus p has to equal 0. Or that y is 0, x minus q has to equal 0, which means x is p here, or x is q here. Now we know that it's the opposite sign of them, right? So if I come over to here and I'm in this nice form here, I know that that is a root and that is a root. And I know those two roots are -3 and 1. So if I go to this graph and I put it at 1 and I put this one at -3, I don't have a parabola, do I? The only thing I know is the a value here is 1. So it's an up and down, a vertical, or a happy parabola. But I can't graph it because I don't know the vertex. Or do I? What do I know about these 2 points? I know that right in the middle is an axis of symmetry that will go through the vertex. How do I get right in the middle of these two things? Well, you have to think back to like grade 5 or something when you learned how to do, your teacher would have said averages, but what you're actually doing is calculating the mean. And what you do is you take this value, -3, you add it to this value, and then you divide by 2. -3 plus 1 is -2, divided by 2 is -1. That is your vertex x value. So this line of symmetry, what it actually gives you, and I'm going to write it down here, is x equals -1, which gives you this line, the axis of symmetry. Now you have an x value, don't you? What do you see right there and there? You see x. So all you do is you take that and you put it in here. What is -1 plus 3? Well, that is positive 2. What is negative 1 minus 1? Well, that is negative 2. 2 times negative 2 is negative 4. And y equals that. So right here, at negative 1, negative 4 is my vertex, and then I can sketch it. Very, very easy. So let's come over to this side. There's my P, there's my Q, which means this has to be negative 3, and this has to be positive 1. Negative 3, 1. Now, I take P, 3, I add negative 1, and I divide by 2 to get 3 plus negative 1 is, excuse me, screwed that up. Negative 3 plus 1 divided by 2 is negative 2 divided by 2 is negative 1. Same thing we had over here. So I know my vertex of symmetry, or my axis of symmetry, goes right down negative 1. And then I just go back to here. Y equals 2. Negative 1 plus 3 is 2. And negative 1 minus 1 is negative 2. So 2 times 2 is 4, times negative 2 is negative 8. Negative 1, negative 8. And that makes sense because A was 2, so everything had to stretch. It had to double. So when I went over 2, I should have gone up 4, but I went up 8. So let's look at this one. Right away we know x equals 4 and 6, yes? So 4, 6. Now, you already know that halfway between 4 and 6 is 5, but 4 plus 6 over 2 equals 10 over 2, which equals 5. So our vertex of symmetry is x equals 5. When I put that in there, 5 minus 4 is 1. 5 minus 6 is negative 1. 1 times negative 1, y equals negative 1. And again, we check. That makes sense. When I go from 4 over to 5 over to 6, that's over 1, so I should go up 1. Negative 1 to 0 is up 1. So there's my graph. This guy, same thing, right? It's going to be 4 and 6. Right? And so our Vx is still going to be 5. All that's the same, but now it's at negative a half. So I go to here. That's going to be my y is going to equal negative 1/2 times 1 times negative 1. So that is positive 1/2, right? Because negative 1/2 times 1 is negative 1/2. Negative 1/2 times negative 1 is positive 1/2. So it's going to be right here at 5 1/2. And then I got to go that way. And that makes sense because it's negative. And down here, now this one always messes you guys up because you forget that x can be negative 2. All of you see that right away. Negative 2. Got it. No problem. Like, oh, what's the other one? This is 0. So negative 2 plus 0 over 2 is negative 1. So there's my axis of symmetry. That would be negative 1, Negative 1 plus 2 is positive 1. Negative 1 times negative 1 is negative 1. And there's my graph. Slightly trickier, right? I'm going to write this out totally. Let's remember x plus 4 would have to equal 0. So that's an easy one. So x equals negative 4. No problem. And 2x minus 1 also has to equal 0. So 2x has to equal 1 because I bring that over. X has to equal 1/2. Oh, barf. This one's tricky. So I've got one of my dots here at negative 4. And the other one here is at 1/2. Yuck. But it's not a problem because I still just do the work. Negative 4 plus 1/2 divided by 2. That is negative 3.5 divided by 2, which is, we remember 2 times 3 is 6, plus 1 is 7, so it's negative 7/2 divided by 2, which is negative 7/2 times 1/2, which is negative 7/4. So now, I go to here, no problem. My x value is negative 7/4, which is just 1 3/4. So negative 7/4. And then I sub that back in up here. And that's going to be difficult because you guys are all scared of fractions, but it's no big deal. 2 times negative 7/4 minus 1 times negative 7/4 plus 4. Well, that's negative 14/4 minus 4/4 and negative 7/4 plus 16/4, which gets me negative 14 minus 4, negative 18/4 times 9/4 gets me negative 18 times 9 is 162 over 16, which is 10 1/4. No, sorry, 10 1/8. Sorry, yeah, negative 10 1/8. So down here, negative 10 1/8. So it's going to be down here, and we go like that. All right, now let's put it all together. The patterns of the factored form. 1. X minus p has to equal 0. X minus q has to equal 0. So p and q are roots. Roots are x-intercepts. The trick there, it's opposite. The sign. So, we remember, if it's x minus p, then p is the root. I don't want to have that red, because this was red. I'm just going to change this. So if it's x minus p, then positive p is the root. If it's x plus p, then negative p is the root. If it's mx minus p, then p over m is the root. And if it's mx plus p, then negative p over m is the root. The second thing we know, if we take x-intercept 1 and add it to x-intercept 2 and divide by 2, we get the axis of symmetry. Which of course gives us the vertex x coordinate. If I sub vertex x back in, I get vertex y. And then number 3, A is the same as always. Positive A equals that. Negative A gives me that kind of parabola. And I remember, for every move that way on a graph, x, I go up or down A times x squared. And then I'm done. Alrighty, ladies and gents. We will see you after the weekend. Don't forget to do the quiz. It's due Sunday night. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.